Before we begin the message, I just want to do a prayer for peace. As we know, there's been most of us know, there's been a ceasefire in the Middle East, and a tremendous gratitude for that happening, but also an understanding that there's more to come, and we don't really know where it's going to lead. And so the message itself does not speak to the ceasefire, but the message does speak to treating every single person as a child of God, someone who should be honored and esteemed, treated with dignity and respected. And so indirectly, it's kind of woven in there, but I do want to take a time to just pause, reflect, and pray on the potential significance of this, and with a prayer for a path forward also of more hope and more healing. So let's pray. Lord, every child is created in your image. May we honor that with all of who we are and all that we do. And may this glimmer of peace lead to a road of greater hope, healing, wonder, respect, all the qualities, Lord, that we know are inherent in who you are and how you call us to live in relationship with you as well as each other. Amen. So this idea of peace, part of what I'll be talking about today is the peace of God inside each of us. And when I say peace, I mean two different versions of peace. There's the P-I-E-C-E, peace, like the little part of God in each of us, but also the peace, P-E-A-C-E, that's in each of us. And it's in every single person who comes through our doors. We are all created in the image of God. We have this part of God inside of us, almost like a piece of a puzzle. And when someone comes to us and comes to Oak Brook, they're bringing that peace with us. And how we respond to that can create tremendous opportunities for ourselves, for each other, for the world. And it's up to us. So the title of the message is Radical Hospitality. Now, years ago, there actually was a movement in churches that was called Radical Hospitality. I would describe it as pathetic hospitality. It actually reflected the outfit I was telling some of you I was planning on wearing earlier. I had this idea of this really boring outfit I was going to wear, just a plain blue top and gray pants. I'm like, okay, that's not radical hospitality. That is a warm smile and a firm handshake. That's not the same. Radical hospitality is different. It's a mindset. It's a belief. It's a feeling. It's a desire to truly express the love of God to every single person who walks through our doors. It changes everything, absolutely everything. Now, some of you are new to Oak Brook. We had some newcomers coming in today. Some of you have been here for decades. Regardless of whether you literally just walked through the door this morning or you've been here for years, I'd like you to pause for a minute and think about, what would it be like to walk through these doors for the first time? What would you see? What would you experience? What would it feel like inside, walking through Oak Brook's doors? Now, I think we need to be a little honest about Oak Brook. If you walk through the doors at 10:45, you might look around and not see a whole lot of folks. And that's part of the experience. And we need to be honest about that. That is part of the experience. Not the best part of our experience, but part of the experience. Okay? But what else? What else would it be? In many ways, just like we have a home that we welcome guests to, Oak Brook is our home. We're a faith family. We're a community that loves on each other. So how do we welcome people to our home? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What can it be like? So I'd like us to take a few minutes right now. For those of you who are new to Oak Brook, before the message or during as part of the message, we often have a time to talk to each other about a question that relates to the message that we'll be speaking about. And so our question for today is, what helps you feel welcome when you go someplace new or meet someone new? So I'd like you to take a few minutes at your table. If you're not at a table, come join a table or mix it whichever way makes sense to you, and take a few minutes and reflect on what helps you feel welcome when you go into a new situation or new experience. Just take a few minutes and we'll come back on that. And it's a great opportunity to share. John, I believe, has a microphone. If you would like to share something that you personally, your folks at your table talked about, but what helps you feel welcome, John has a mic. We'll bring it around and see what's on your mind. Does anyone have something they'd like to share? You got Mercy.
Something that always makes me feel welcomed is a warm smile and people willing to come talk to me. So I don't have to be the first one talking since I don't know how people might be. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mercy. Any other thoughts?
We kind of said a similar thing about, people approaching you when you don't know the situation, but then we kind of talked about even the second time that you come back, people approaching you again, but also recognizing, oh, you've been here before and remembering things about you. So just more like an intentionality behind people approaching you as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
We talked about two things over here. We are both introverts, so we love a nice warm welcome and a smile. But having people not descend upon you and want to talk and, is actually a more welcoming environment. Obviously, for extroverts, the more the better. But for us, we like to be welcomed and then sort of have our own space and warm up and things like that.
Thank you.
And the second thing I said is, with kids, it's very welcoming when people notice that you have children and that they do things that are embracing of children, whether that's it's okay if they make noise. It's okay if they make a little mess. It's okay that they might not act perfectly and that, people go out of their way to either have programs for the kids or food. Kids love food, is really an incredibly welcoming experience because then you're not stressed about how all that's going to go and you can just kind of relax into the moment and the atmosphere. So,
Thank you for sharing that. As a mother of 4 children, I can tell you we had many years of messes and noise in church. And I understand completely what you're saying in terms of that situation. And also coming late with kids with their hair all over the place. It was always an adventure getting to church every Sunday, so I understand completely. Are there any others who'd like to share? Great, thanks. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate your sharing. It's different for each of us. What feels warm and welcoming to some people feels overwhelming to others. What feels like they're being left behind for some people is like exactly what some people need. And that part of discerning what is right for this situation can be challenging because we each have our own nature as well. Some of us love to descend on someone. I'm at the door pretty much every Sunday. I love being at the door. And there's others, it's the last place they'd like to be. And both are okay. So as we go through the message, I'm not trying to say that everyone has to act a certain way to be warm and welcoming or to show radical hospitality. I'm just asking you to find that peace inside of you. What's your something? What is your something that helps people feel welcome? And it's different for each person. So as we're going through all this, just think about what's my something? What's the something I have? AI defines radical hospitality this way. And yes, AI can be used for all kinds of great things, including this. Radical hospitality is a practice of offering extraordinary, unconditioned welcome to everyone, creating inclusive and accepting environments by going beyond conversational friendliness to meet people's needs and break down barriers of participation. It involves an intentional, as one of you said, intentional, transformational approach to inclusivity, requiring organizers to deeply consider the guest needs and the event's experience, and to extend themselves beyond their comfort zone to embrace the other. It's amazing that AI can say so many things that churches have been trying to teach for years. According to AI, there are key aspects of radical hospitality. It extends hospitality to everyone without conditions or expectations of conformity. It involves a deep consideration of others' needs and experience, which we talked about, rather than just politeness or superficial friendliness. It's not just a warm smile and a firm handshake. It goes deeper than that. I see you. You matter to me. You matter to God and you matter to me. It goes beyond just the superficial. The goal is to create a sense of belonging and to include people within a community. This is the part that's hard, especially for many church people. Even if that means conceding some aspects of the existing community's identity. Think about that. Welcoming people to the extreme that it means that we might have to change something about ourselves. What we thought was important, what we thought mattered. That changes everything. When someone walks through our doors, we are opening ourselves up to transformation. We're opening ourselves up to seeing God in a way we have never seen God before. We're opening ourselves up to the fact that there may be a piece inside of God inside them that makes us question what we've been doing for our entire lives. That is radical hospitality. That is the willingness to experience God and each other in a whole new light. And it changes everything. Absolutely everything. And that, as Christians, is the part that sets us apart from AI. We are people. We are people created in the image of God. We are people who are taught by God, specifically by Jesus, to say and to honor and to respect every single person as a child of God, created in God's image. That sets us apart. It should set us apart. It should make things look different here than anywhere else in the world. And I think it does. I know it does. And the cool thing is, Jesus showed us exactly what radical hospitality looks like, feels like, and sounds like. Now, some of you know, actually I was talking to Corey earlier and Karen, and I haven't mentioned this to Zenon, but a few weeks ago, Corey helped put together a beautiful jazz concert at Lake Ann Plaza. And Karen and Zenon's band, Accidental Red, played there. And I went with Jenna Moyle, John's wife, and another friend of mine, and we had a wonderful time just enjoying the music and enjoying the atmosphere. It was a great event. And the entire time I was there, I was thinking, this is church. This is church. Because it was this incredibly complex, beautiful mixture of all of creation in this wonderful moment, okay? There was a man who played the bongos in the back of the band. The first time I watched, like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if he's part of the band. No. He's there every Sunday. He brings his bongos, he brings his tambourine, he brings his maracas. He plays with every band that comes through every single time there's a performance at Lake Ann Plaza. He comes from the retirement community, and he comes every time. He played with all the bands that played that day. He's in the back doing his thing. And no one seemed to think much of it at all. He was just part of the experience. How cool is that? How cool is that? He's part of the experience. He's accepted and welcomed and loved for who he is. And I know nothing about music. He may have driven all the musicians crazy as far as I'm concerned. I have no clue. He may have been totally off on everything. But to me, it was beautiful. How amazing that this man gets to have this experience, and we're all watching him perform with all of these different bands and being welcomed. There was a woman who's trying to get everyone up to dance, and she was going up to everybody and encouraging them to dance in such a beautiful way. I can't dance. That wasn't happening. But man, it was so cool to see her do what she does. Like we were saying, some of us are introverts, some of us are extroverts. I don't dance, at least not in public, okay? I don't sing and I don't dance. But how cool that she was doing her something. And that was her something. There were toddlers who kept running towards the bands. They kept running forward. And there were the parents who were running after them. And over again, these kids kept running. They could barely walk, but man, they heard the music, and they wanted to be in the middle of it. And it was mostly moms running after them and bringing them back, and running after them and bringing them back. And it might have been distracting for some of the musicians, but how cool is that? That here they are, just loving on this experience and joining in. There were teenagers on skateboards with their helmets unbuckled, of course. The mother in me is like, buckle the helmet. But they're there. They're part of this experience. They're enjoying the moment, and they're welcomed as they are. How cool is that? Why can't we all live that way all the time? Seeing this peace of God inside every person and celebrating it, being excited about it, and not being so focused on it's not conforming to what we want to happen in this moment. Every one of those musicians could have been very frustrated between the maracas in the back, the kids running toward the band, the woman going all around getting folks to dance. I didn't see any of that. It may have been there, but I didn't see it and I didn't feel it. I felt a welcoming presence. I felt people enjoying themselves and celebrating each other. How cool is that? What a great opportunity. And we have that opportunity, which brings us to our reading. This is from Matthew 9, verses 10 through 13. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I've come to call the righteous, not the sinners." This story actually appears in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, different variations. And anytime something appears in all three of the synoptic gospels, we know to pay attention. There's something in this that we need to hear. We need to listen. We need to absorb as part of who we are, our DNA. And this is one of those situations. It mattered to all three of these writers, this story. It needs to matter to us as well. So what about it matters? What about this scene is significant? As some of you know, just prior to this event in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is walking along and he calls Matthew to be one of his disciples. So he calls Matthew, and then he goes to Matthew's house. And who's the house? Tax collectors and sinners. Those are the people Jesus chooses to be with immediately after calling Matthew in Matthew's home. Think about that. Jesus tells you, think about that experience. Who would be in your home? Who would you want in your home with Jesus there? Whom would you invite? Who would be the first on your list? Who might be the last? Who does Jesus want on the list? Just reflect on that. Not a judgment, just the reality of how we do life these days and how Jesus calls us to do it differently, totally differently. Part of this is the follow me part. Jesus tells Matthew to follow me, goes into his home, and opens it up to other tax collectors, whom we know tax collectors were those in the society, this time period, the tax collectors would have been shunned because they were cooperating with Roman authorities. But the word sinner here is something different to think about. Often in Scripture, often in messages, we talk about sinner being missing the mark. And that's true. There are many times in Scripture when that's how we refer to it as missing the mark. But the word used for sinner here is actually a little different. The word used for sinner here is devoted to sin, filled with wickedness. That's different than missing the mark. That's very different than missing the mark. I want you to think about this again. Missing the mark is used in this situation. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens, you have gained your brother. That's missing the mark. That's where that version was used, that translation. Another example of missing the mark. When Peter asked Jesus how many times he needs to forgive someone who has sinned against him, that word in those situations was missing the mark. This is different. This idea of devoted to sin, full of wickedness, was used in these situations. Then Jesus came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hand of sinners, people who are devoted to sin." It's different in that situation. In Luke 6, verse 32, "If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners, people who are devoted to sin, love those who love them." Jesus spent time and welcomed people who were devoted to sin. That changes our perspective, doesn't it? Really changes everything. Now, I want to make something very clear. I am not saying that the people who walk through our doors are devoted to sin. Okay? That's not the mindset I want us to have. That's not the approach I want us to have. That's not where I'm going with this. It's just the opposite. In every situation, there is a peace of God to every person who walks through our doors. How do we welcome them? How do we make it clear that we want them here, we love them, and we're going to journey together? Because that's who we are, and that's what we believe. When we recognize that each person has a piece of God, we are far more likely to do radical hospitality well, really well. Because we'll see God in them as they're coming here. And it'll change our mindset. Again, Jesus shows us what radical hospitality looks like, feels like, and sounds like. The sound actually is the partying. When, at the wedding, Jesus turned water into an awful lot of wine. It wasn't just a little bit, it was a lot of wine. When they had the event in Matthew's house, some scholars say it wasn't just in his home. They weren't in a back room hidden away somewhere. They were spilled out into the street. Jesus wasn't hiding the people he was with. He wasn't saying, I'll be with you in the back room in a corner where no one's looking, but hey, in front of other people, go somewhere else. That's not what he was doing. He's saying, these are my people. They're always my people. They're here, now, and everywhere. These are the people I am going to be with. So the noise is the noise. The sound is the sound of celebration, but it's also the sound of those who complained, of the Pharisees saying, what are you doing with them? That's also the sound of radical hospitality. When we truly open our doors to everyone and make every single person feel welcome in our church, we are going to hear the sound of what are you doing? And why are you doing it? Those people are different. They don't belong there. We're going to hear that sound. It is the reality of doing radical hospitality. That this church is different. It's welcoming. It's inclusive. We love people. Really love them for who they are. It's a beautiful sound in its own way. In its own way. And to think about how Jesus shows us what it looks like, part of it is just thinking about the disciples. If we just reflect on them, who's part of that inner circle? Jesus' inner circle. We get a sense of what it first started to look like. So we had Peter and Andrew and James and John. We had fishermen. Okay, we can relate to that. That's not so bad. Matthew, as we said, a tax collector. Someone who would have been seen as collaborating with the enemy. Imagine that coming through our doors, whatever your mind of the enemy is. How do we handle that? What do we do? What does radical hospitality look like in these situations? We had Simon, a zealot, someone who wanted to violently overthrow the government. The polar opposite of what Jesus would teach. What does that look like? What if someone who comes to our doors with a mindset that is the polar opposite of what we're teaching as a church? What do we do? How do we do it? We had Thomas, who would need to touch the wounds. Couldn't just believe by faith. He had to touch for himself. Okay, and there are people in our world who can't just walk by faith like some of us think they should in our minds. They need to touch. They need to touch everything for themselves. What does that look like? How do we make them feel welcome? Are we okay with that? Hey, this person just needs to touch the wounds. That's their way. That's their style, and that's okay. It's okay. It's okay for Jesus. It's okay for us. Okay? And then we had Judas, who would ultimately betray Jesus. And that's just the inner circle. Let's get a little bigger. Let's think about radical hospitality, even bigger stretch. In Jesus' ministry, the circle gets much larger. We had a woman who had 5 husbands, a demoniac, a centurion, a paralytic, a leper. The list goes on and on and on. And in our day and age, we don't necessarily think of these people as being devoted to sin. Okay, we don't think in those terms at all for the most part in our society. However, back then, that would have been the explanation for their condition, for many of them. So this idea of Jesus expanding this circle, expanding it wider and wider to people who are devoted to sin in some ways, is really a lot to wrap our heads around. It's a lot to wrap our heads around. What does that look like? What does it feel like? What does it mean for us? Again, people coming through our door, that's not the mindset. The mindset is flip it. Let's turn it around. Where's the peace of God in them? What does God want us to see and experience through this situation? And Jesus treated every one of these people with the dignity they deserved. That's the part we turn on a dime. Every single person as a child of God, loved by God, esteemed by God, that we can treat with dignity, the dignity they deserve. This past week, Pope Leo released an exhortation that Pope Francis actually began. And in it, he shares these words: no sign of affection, even the smallest, will ever be forgotten, especially if it is shown to those who are suffering or in need. And we know that in Matthew, Jesus says, just as you did to the least of these, you have done for me. This isn't a statement about being nice. Please be nice, okay? But go deeper than that, much deeper. This is a way of doing life, a way of encountering God through each other, a totally different way of experiencing anyone in your life, not just here in the building, not just here. In Pope Leo's words again, from the moment he entered the world, Jesus knew the bitter experience of rejection. Think about that for a second. From the moment he entered the world, Jesus knew the bitter experience of rejection. Jesus knows what it's like to not feel welcome. And he tells us to do things differently, to set the world on fire, seeing the peace of God in every person you ever interact with, all the time. In Luke, Jesus advises, when you give a dinner or a banquet, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, lest they invite you in return, and you'll be repaid. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you. With radical hospitality, we don't expect anything in return. We do our best to make people feel welcome simply because it's the right thing to do. Whether they stay at Oak Brook or they go somewhere else. Whether they become really involved in our church or we never see them again. That's not the point. The point is to love them because we're called to love them. To treat them with dignity because we're called to do it. To do our best to make them feel included, regardless of where they go afterwards. That's up to God, not us. That's not our job. Pope Leo cites a story of a deacon in Rome who was forced by the Roman authorities to turn over the treasures of the church. The following day, he brought the poor with him. Questioned about where the promised treasures might be, he pointed to the poor and said, these are the treasures of our church. It's the people. The treasure of our church at Oak Brook is the people. The amazing people in this building, outside this building, those who come every Sunday and those who come whenever they show up, all of them. They're the treasures of this church. And that mindset changes everything. They are the treasures, the absolute treasures that we have. About a month ago, John and I were in the church together, and I was in the back room, which is one of the reasons why I have a doorbell, and I came out from the back and saw someone walking away from the door, and I went out after him. He knocked on the door. Now, we often have people coming looking for food. That's standard. This situation was different. He only spoke Russian. John and I speak English. John speaks Spanish. I have about this number of words of Spanish. None of that was going to help us in this situation. He maybe spoke 20 words of English if we were lucky, okay? And yes, he was looking for food, but there was so much more to the story. It was a phenomenal experience. Through a combination of Google Translate, his 10 Russian words are zero, his 10 English words are zero Russian words, and an awful lot of acting out, we learned this man's story. A story of faith, a story of persecution, a story of a near-death experience, a story of being hungry, a story of all kinds of things. It was phenomenal. And honestly, I suspect if I tried to act out what he did, it would be lost in all of you. But there's certain things I think you would hear. This part, he was saying what happened to him with his faith. He's being beaten. This part, when he's describing being on his deathbed and not knowing if he would survive. And then this part, when he said Jesus, you could say Jesus, reaching in and saving him. When we talk about the Holy Spirit speaking in situations, that was one of the most powerful situations I've ever had. What we had in common from a language standpoint was so little, but we had Jesus in common, and God, and hope, and healing, and wonder. And God does those things all the time if we're open to it. We almost missed this situation. He knocked on the door. Sometimes people knock on the door and really mean to go to the school around back, so he could have been doing that. Fortunately, ran out after him, brought him inside, and spent about an hour or so hearing his story through the phone, through his acting, through everything else. And it was a phenomenal story. And thanks to Oak Brook being Oak Brook, we had that opportunity. We could hear his story. We could listen to all of it in the depth and the wonder. John and I had the time to spend with him. There are many churches you would not have two pastors available to sit with you for an hour with no advance notice. But we could, and we did. And thank you, Oak Brook, for making that possible, because we all benefit from that. And we also could send him home with food. Again, thank you, Oak Brook, for creating an opportunity for us to not only minister to this person, but be ministered by this person. Hearing his story was transformational. Knowing that God can speak into any situation, even with the limited language we each had, was transformational. And it's also the essence of who we are as a faith community. We are a place where those things can and do happen. How incredible is that? Absolutely incredible. Last week, a similar experience. A gentleman came through. He actually started in the parking lot, talking with Raphael and praying with Raphael. Fortunately, he didn't really feel comfortable coming to the door at that point, but he found Raphael, and they talked and they prayed. And after that moment, he did come to the door. And again, John and I had an opportunity to sit with him, to pray with him, to hear his story, which brought me to tears, and to give him some food, and to know he is deeply loved by God and by us. Will we see him again in church? Probably not. We'll do deliveries to their family because they need food. But the point isn't to see them in church. The point is to do whatever God's calling us to do. We had two women a couple months ago, lost track of time, but they actually were homeless. And they came in with their shopping cart with all their belongings, and we popped the shopping cart in the office, and they hung out in the lobby for a bit. And the reality is we will probably may not see them much ever again, but they call regularly. I'll put it that way. They call regularly. And I hear their story. And I'm not going to romanticize homelessness, because there is nothing romantic about homelessness. Or is there anything romantic about the struggles they're facing? But these women take care of each other. And they have taken care of each other through all kinds of awful situations. And it's beautiful. There is a peace of God inside these two women that if the rest of us interacted that way, if the rest of us took care of people like these two women take care of each other, this world would be a totally different place. Totally transformed. They do not let each other down. They always stick together. If one person gets food, she shares it with the other one. That's just their reality, no matter what. There was one point where they called and said, well, what are you going to have for breakfast? I said, well, we can get 2 bags of potato chips for $1, and we each get one. I said, let's do something besides that. And we figured it out. But this idea that everything is shared, absolutely everything, no matter what. And again, it's not romantic. I don't want to glorify homelessness. It's a tragedy in our society that so many people don't have a place to sleep, a safe place to sleep, or enough food to eat. But these women take care of each other. And when they walk through our door, without us even knowing, they brought this peace of God, both P-I-E-C-E and P-E-A-C-E, with them. And because they felt comfortable coming here with their shopping cart, we all get to hear their story and part of it. We all get to experience God in new ways. We all get to look at things from a different perspective. How cool is that? That is radical hospitality. That is transformational for all of us. So what I'd like us to do is simply reflect on what's your something. Okay? So again, not everyone can, needs to, or should stand at the front door. Imagine if we all stood at the front door. Rick and I coached soccer together, and there was this point where everyone wants to be where the ball is, and that is so not helpful. Okay? It is so not helpful. If you've ever had kids in sports, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're all running around chasing the ball. That is not radical hospitality. Okay? Everyone has a position. And one of the hardest things as a coach is teaching people to play your position. Okay? Because there's a difference. And the positions are often based on what you're really good at. I mean, let's be real. We don't, we have goalies because they're goalies. They're great with their hands, may not be so great with their feet, okay? You have people who are really fast you put in certain positions. You have people who need a little more time but have a strong kick you put somewhere else. So this isn't about all of us being the same. Please do not think that way. Please don't be like me and stand at the door. We'll intimidate everyone who comes here, unless that's your thing. If that's your thing, let's do it. So take a moment and reflect on what's your something. What is your something? I'm not picking on Corey today, but Corey's great when someone's sitting alone, bringing them to her table or going to their table, and just quietly helping them feel included. If I want someone praying for me, I'm going to check with Bronca. And you may be similar. You may never want to stand at the door or reach out to someone or stand somewhere, but you can pray like there's no tomorrow. And you can pray for every person who comes here. And they may never know, and that's okay. But that may be your something. And that is an amazing something. You may be someone who gets them a cup of coffee. You may be someone who comes quietly alongside them. Franny, I'm not trying to pick on you either, but Franny does that beautifully. Franny gets to know all kinds of people. I think she's a spy. Maybe she's a spy, because she'd be a good one. I'm just teasing you, Franny. She's great at coming alongside folks and getting to know them quietly and beautifully and lovingly. And we can do that in different ways. So radical hospitality looks different for each of us. And that's a great thing. But in order to be a faith community that loves on each other and loves others, it's important to reflect on what's our something. What's my something as an individual? What's our something as a church? What is the thing that I can do or we can do to make sure others feel welcome and know they are loved? Because we've all got something. I was telling Myron earlier, when Rick and I coach, one of Rick's gifts as a coach is finding a position for everybody. And it just really is. We'd coach together for years, and we'd have players. I remember specific players who started playing soccer 5th or 6th grade, which is not typical around here. It's hard to start a sport at that age around here because people start at such a young age. And these girls came out in 5th or 6th grade, and there always was a position for them. There always was a place for them. There always was a way for them to be encouraged. And that's incredible. And that mindset of there's a place for you here. You may not know what it is right away. We're not quite sure what your gifts are. We're not quite sure what the peace of God is. We're not quite sure. We're still getting to know each other, and that's okay because it takes time. But it still takes a mindset of, I know there's a place for you here. I know there is. And just having that mindset changes everything. You don't have to figure it out right away. Sometimes it took a few seasons for some situations. And that's okay too. But just having the mindset of, I know there's a place for you here. I know something in me can connect with something in you. I know the peace of God in me can and will connect with the peace of God in you. And beautiful things can and will happen. If it can do it, if God can do it, which we know He can, and we don't even speak the same language, and we're using Google Translate and pantomime and who knows what else to communicate, and still the power of the Holy Spirit was so transformational. God can do anything. God's ways are infinite. And that's one of the beauties of radical hospitality. God's ways are infinite. So what's your something? There's a peace of God in every person who walks through our doors. Let's find it. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this opportunity to look to you, to honor you, to remember how you taught us to live, and to seek that in our own lives. May we see every child as a child of God. Every child is someone who has a piece of you inside them, and treat them that way, the dignity they deserve, with open arms, a warm smile, quiet prayers, whatever you put on our heart, Lord. For this and so much more we pray. Amen.